Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. One of the big questions that farmers are faced with this fall is, what are we going to do for crop rotation next year? Well, if you're going with corn, you're going to have to look at the different seed trade options out there and try to justify the cost of each one. We'll discuss that today.
We'll also talk a little about micronutrients, especially boron. Now, when you start putting together your fertility plan this fall or next spring, boron's probably not at the top of your list, but we want to talk about why it is so incredibly important to have the right levels of boron in your crop.
Well, speaking about important, you have to control our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop it later in the show. But first, here's our Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
Both of my grandpas were farmers, and if they were alive today, I don't think they could even fathom how we were actually farming this ground. Let's start with crop nutrition. It requires farmers to apply fertilizer to each acre to feed the crop. Now, the way it's been done in the past and for generations is, well, put the same amount of fertilizer out all over the field because, hey, we're raising the same crop. But now with today's technology, farmers are actually getting down to small parts of that field and managing each little part of the field differently.
Here's why this is so important. If a farmer can look at each individual acre and just analyze that acre and apply fertilizer correctly for that acre, well, now he's got a much better chance to properly fertilize. What I'm getting at here is the average farmer in the United States today is not putting on as much fertilizer as what he's removing. Well, once he starts farming by the acre, he's able to actually do soil testing by that acre and change the fertility rate as he goes across each acre. So in other words, as farmers, we know there is a certain percentage of our ground that's bad, that we can't produce a lot. And a lot of times that's what farmers fertilize for across the board. Oh, I can only get 150 bushel corn on a lot of our ground, so that's what we're going to fertilize for. But there are spots in fields that could raise 200 or 250 bushel corn, for example. So the farmer needs to apply extra fertilizer in those areas. It leads to more overall crop production without over applying fertilizer in any area that can't produce enough crop.
Well, in our country, every acre is being farmed. If it can be farmed, for the most part, it's being farmed right now. So for farmers to grow their farms, it's a lot easier to increase the production on each acre than it is to try to find new acres that somebody else is already farming. So for farmers, the way they can most quickly increase their production on their farm is by dealing with each one of these problem areas that Brian was talking about. You see it on yield maps today. Most every farmer has got a yield monitor in his combine, and as he goes across the field, the yield goes up and the yield comes down. If a farmer can focus on those areas of, wow, here's some spots in my field that are great, what can I do to make them even better? And here's some areas that are poor, what can I do to bring them up to be as good as the rest of the farm? They can really increase profitability without having to spend a whole bunch of money trying to buy more land.
I'll just give you a quick example off our own farm with this. So we've got some ground now that the past landowner and our dad, who farmed the ground for many years from this landowner, both said, oh, we've got spots out here that it's very sandy and it's just not worth hardly even farming. So just put a minimal amount of fertilizer on most of that ground. Don't even worry about it. Well, once we started soil testing by the acre and analyzing the worst spots, what we found is the ground wasn't that sandy. What the big problem was micronutrients. There was a certain couple of micronutrients that if we just applied more of that was our yield limiting factor in those spots. So once you start kind of zooming down in on smaller areas and analyzing what do we need to do here to increase overall productivity, I mean, just think about it. If there are 5 acres out of 100 acres that are producing almost nothing, if you get those 5 acres to produce quite a bit more, well, that brings your whole farm average up, and obviously it increases profitability and increases overall food production.
This has certainly been possible with technology, and farmers from 20, 30, 40 years ago, they'd have no idea this is even possible, and they would be very, very excited about how much more efficient they could be on the farms with new technology. So we're seeing farmers farm by the acre rather than by the field or by the whole farm level.
Well, one of the things farmers are looking at by the acre is weed control. We'll talk about stopping our weed of the week coming up later in the show.
Sometimes getting the yield you want means you need a whole new game plan. Think about it. When the older conventional fertilizer you've been using goes head to head with tough soil conditions, they can get all tied up before they ever have a chance to score. That's when it's time to regroup. Time to send in the A-Team. AgroLiquid isn't like other fertilizers. Their nutrient-balanced products stay in the soil in the right formulations in just the right amounts. And because of AgroLiquid's unique chelation technology, you wind up using less and seeing more in your yields. So you could wind up having one heck of a championship season. Make a smart start with AgroLiquid. To find the closest nutrient coach near you, visit agroliquid.com.
I love the fact that we get very little grain loss from the head. Other brands, other corn heads, we've seen that up to 3-4 bushel per acre in some instances where we have some dry corn. We're growing as much corn as we can. We don't want to be leaving this out in the field at harvest time. So the fellow's done a nice job of making sure we're capturing almost every kernel that we can. So yes, I would recommend the fellow head to other farmers.
For lower costs, higher production, Mandico Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Avoid costly downtime with Twister's ease of maintenance. Its unique Coulter suspension allows it to follow the contour of the field yet remain forgiving in rocks. Our hydraulically adjustable Coulter angles mean you never leave the cab, making residue management easier, more efficient. Spring or fall, the Mandico Twister is the new leader. Check with your local dealer or visit mandicoagri.com.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
As weed resistance becomes more of a problem across the country, your crop protection program needs to stay flexible to be effective. Hypro Innovative Spray Technology's wide selection of spray tips and nozzle configurations are available to keep your crop protection program right on technology, right on target.
One of the most important micronutrients on the farm is boron. We want to talk today about why it's so important and what you need to do to properly manage it.
All right, let me give you a real quick example. When we think about boron, a lot of times people think about corn and they think, oh, I have to have boron if I'm going to raise corn. And alfalfa certainly is another crop that, wow, I've got to have good boron levels if I want to raise alfalfa. So when we look at alfalfa, we see guys putting on a little bit of boron, maybe several times during the year to make sure there's plentiful amounts for each cutting, depending on where you're at and what you're getting for rainfall. In corn, it's starting to be the same way. Guys that are shooting for high yield corn are putting on multiple shots of boron throughout the year, especially if you've got lighter soils or you're worried about leaching. Now, when we look at corn ears as we get towards harvest, if we see some tip back on the ear, what's the first thing that you think? Well, a lot of guys will say, oh, if I've got some tip back, maybe I had a little too high a population. Maybe I could cut my population back just a little bit. But unfortunately, when you cut that population back, sometimes you still see tip back. So what's going on? Well, in many cases, it's a shortage of boron that's causing those last kernels on the ear not to fill out or to abort at some point. It's one of those nutrients that you should be testing your crop throughout the season and very likely applying multiple doses, small doses, throughout the year.
Boron is incredibly important in almost any crop when it comes to flowering and the overall seed production, so you really want to look hard at this. What we will commonly talk about on a Midwest Lab soil test is 1.2 to 3.0 parts per million on a per acre basis. That's what we're looking for. So it's not a whole lot. And that's one of the mistakes that a lot of people will run into is they'll say, well, it's only just a little bit. It's no big deal. I mean, look at what the crop removes. It's hardly anything. Why do I need to apply boron? Well, I realize that it's not much, but you know what? I look at that as good news. In other words, it's not going to cost you much money to get the proper amount of boron out there you need to raise a great crop.
One of the things that holds many farmers back, and us included, is the fear that we might overdo it. When we think about micronutrients and you need such a small amount, well, maybe you look at the price tag and say, well, man, it doesn't cost very much. Maybe I'll just put on a bunch. So I got plenty for 10 years and it's $5, $10. It's no big deal. I'll just put a whole bunch out there. And if you do that ever, well, you may be surprised that you could actually damage crop if you get too much. I have a story about boron that I've told on the show before. When I was first starting into full-time agronomy work right out of college, there was a farmer raising alfalfa, and in the spreader that he was trying to spread his fertilizer on his alfalfa, the boron all settled to the bottom, and he ended up killing about 100 yards or so into the field because he way over-applied boron there. And people hear a story like that and they think, ooh, I don't know if I want to mess with boron because I could overdo it. I think that's a little bit overblown. It takes a good amount to really overdo it. Now don't get too careless here, but it is safe to apply the amount of boron that you need for your crop. That's what I'm trying to get at. So if you do look at your tests and you see, hey, I am a little bit short, don't be afraid to go out there with some boron, and maybe you do multiple apps just to make sure you don't have an application issue where you way overdo it with one application.
Oh, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about that at all. I mean, we've put on.
I think a lot of guys are.
No, I know a lot of guys are, but you don't need to. Here's one of the things you do need to know though. With boron, it leaches. So you've got to be applying boron most likely every year in most soil types. It's not going to take much, just a little bit. The cheapest way to get boron right now is Solubor. Doesn't cost much money. It's about roughly 1/3 actual boron, and you can mix that up in water even and spray that out. And I really like that, and just spraying boron all by itself. So Darren's all worried about, oh, we're going to overapply. Well, you know what? If the only nutrient you put out at one time is boron, you have very little risk for overapplying. What we worry about is when you start mixing it with a whole bunch of other stuff. Whether it's liquid or dry, you run the risk of settling out. So just be really careful about the type of boron you choose, but there are a number of different ways to put it on: pre-emerge, post-emerge, liquid, dry. Usually what we're looking at is applying some amount of boron every year though. However you want to get it done, that's fine. But like Darren said, especially if you have lighter soil, heavier rainfall amounts, you might want to be putting on boron even 2 or 3 times during the course of the growing season.
Look, I'm not scared of the over-application. What I am scared of is not measuring it and not really understanding that I need some boron out there for my crop.
So in other words, soil test and do plant tissue analysis.
Well, one other thing you want to watch out for in your fields is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon-D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
Oh, Ed, what are we presenting?
That Credenz soybeans are designed using smart genetics.
Look, state-of-the-art breeding advances the best germplasm.
Plus, tailored varieties for any field conditions with choice in herbicide-tolerant traits.
And Credenz soybeans come backed by Bayer's ongoing innovation.
Want increased yields and ROI? Plant the smarter soybean.
Talk to an authorized Credenz retailer or discover the right Credenz variety at credenz.bayer.us.
Always read and follow label instructions.
Stop coring your bins with the AgriDry Gravity Grain Spreader. Traditional bin filling systems create uneven concentrations of grain and fine particulates. Uniform grain distribution allows even airflow throughout the entire bin, giving you more control over temperature and moisture content, increasing your grain quality and bottom line. Call us today for more information.
Dry Load Store, 1-855-AGRIDRY.
With
With the success of the Case IH Steiger Quad Track and Magnum Road Track tractors, it's no secret why Case IH is the leader of the track. So it wasn't surprising when the competition started imitating us. But only Case IH offers a 5-axle design to give you a smoother ride, more power to the ground, with less berming and compaction. Still, we're flattered. In fact, if we weren't already red, we'd be blushing.
There are trillions of hardworking microbes right beneath your feet. Today, Monsanto BioAg is harnessing the power of microbes, creating microscopic farmhands that help plants access nutrients, enhance root and shoot growth, and handle stressful conditions throughout the season, protecting and maximizing your yield potential. We're turning 500 trillion microbes into 500 trillion new farmhands, ready for work. Nature, it's powerful technology.
Do corn seed traits make you money? Well, my answer is, it depends.
Well, certainly you have to pick the best genetics for your farm. That's where it all starts. You have to have a hybrid that can yield. But then you have to protect that hybrid. Now, corn rootworm is a real problem. And in some areas it's worse than others. If you're in a continuous corn rotation, it's certainly worse than an area where, hey, I only raise corn once every 10 years. So you have to look at those things and see what you've got. So many times I'll talk to a farmer and they'll say, well, I don't know if getting a SmartStax hybrid is worth it. Maybe I just want above ground protection from corn borers and some of the other bugs like that. Okay, well, let's take a look at what the cost of that soil insecticide is, and then what kind of performance you're going to get out of the soil insecticide versus having the trait in the hybrid.
Well, it just depends. On the corn soil insecticide, you could spend as much as $25 per acre for a full rate of the very best insecticide out there in a SmartBox system, let's say. But, you know, the dries are going to be better. Force or Aztec, those are the two best products on the market. And depending on if you want bags or SmartBoxes and your row spacing, you're in the range of $15 to $25 an acre there. You could, however, go liquid if you wanted to. Now, it's not going to be quite as good, but you could go Capture LFR for roughly $5 to $7 an acre. So that's a lot less expensive. There are a lot of people that are looking at that. But with the Capture LFR, I'd probably expect 80 to 85% control. With Force or Aztec, I'd expect maybe 90% control. It's possible to get up to 95. When you talk about the rootworm trait, as long as you've got two rootworm traits, because we're finding some resistance out there to single BT traits, if you've got two rootworm traits, you're probably 99.9% control. So there is a definite difference there. For me, what I look at is, am I in continuous corn? Do I have really high pressure? If I do, I'm investing that extra money in the SmartStax.
You know what, pressure can certainly vary from year to year. It's hard to guess, you know, is this going to be a bad rootworm year or not? But the important thing that I would say is on your farm, you need to do a little trial work each year to see what's paying for you. For example, for us, it's not uncommon at all that we would split the planter and say put a SmartStax hybrid in half the planter and put maybe a VT Double Pro hybrid in the other half, and then use some rootworm insecticide on that at varying rates throughout the field to see, all right, does it pay to use a rootworm insecticide? Does it pay to use the SmartStax? And then with that insecticide, does it matter what rate I'm using? Am I going to see a difference in yield? And that's where it all comes down to it, is what is the end game going to be? How many dollars per acre am I going to net out on the farm? Which one's going to be better?
Okay, let's step all the way back. Conventional, then you've got the above ground traits, basically corn borer, and then the below ground traits, rootworm. So in most cases around the country, we are recommending the above ground traits. That it doesn't cost much more money and it does seem to pay. Besides that, the Roundup trait comes along with those things, and that's incredibly important if you want good grass control at any point during the growing season. But yeah, that rootworm thing, that's the question. And it all depends on how much is your seed going to cost more per acre. The big difference here is you can vary your seeding rates, you can't really vary your insecticide rate. So I'm just trying to say, in certain areas of the country with your seed provider, it might only cost you $10 or $15 an acre to go SmartStax. But if you're running high population in other areas of the country, maybe it costs you $35 or $40 more to run SmartStax. So you've really got to look at that cost. But all I can tell you is we absolutely believe in these traits. It's just you have to run the economics all the time and make that decision whether or not it's worth it. I'll tell you on our own farm, if it's continuous corn, we're running SmartStax. We're still running some insecticide with it. If it's rotation, we're probably not running Smart Stacks, but we're definitely throwing some insecticide out there just to make sure we've at least got some rootworm control in our lower pressure areas.
And then it's just important to think about, hey, with that Smart Stacks trait, the rootworm has to take a bite out of the root to ingest that Bt protein. Now, it's nothing dangerous for humans or anything like that, but hey, that rootworm does have to take a bite. So using the insecticide keeps the rootworms and other bugs off the roots. So there is definitely a benefit that you're not getting out of the Smart Stacks by having that addition of insecticide in your furrow and around that seed zone.
So once again, this is kind of a tough decision. Just take a look at what's your real cost. All we can tell you is if you look at the 2 rootworm traits, there is quite a bit of value there. Is it as much as what the seed costs? Well, looking at it this year and what the prices are, you could maybe go either way. But at least, hey, we've got some good options now. Not only do we have insecticide, we also have these nice traits.
Well, all these options are great for bugs, Brian, but we have to control our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Weed of the Week is Pennsylvania Smartweed, and Darren, I don't know why they call us Pennsylvania Smartweed. They could call it South Dakota Smartweed because we have all kinds of it on our farm too.
Well, when we were kids, we just called it waterweed because where we would find it in the fields is in areas of poor drainage, the low-lying parts of the field, or along a grass waterway or along a ditch. Now, there are several different kinds of smartweed, and you said Pennsylvania smartweed, right. So let's distinguish that from lady's thumb and from swamp smartweed. Swamp smartweed is a perennial weed. It's very hairy, and you'll see it has rhizomes below the ground. With lady's thumb, on each leaf, you'll see a little purplish colored impression that looks about like a thumbprint on each leaf, and Pennsylvania smartweed doesn't have that, and it has smooth stems.
And it's just an annual weed, this Pennsylvania smartweed, so that's really the good news. You get it under control this year, keep it from going to seed, you're in pretty good shape long term.
Well, the big thing is just getting after it. Like you say, if it's an annual weed, you can't let the thing go to seed. So we'll start with a pre-emerge herbicide program. In corn, for example, I really like Verdict. That's been nice in the burn down and also controlling it a little bit into the season.
Yeah, post-emerge in corn, I like Status. That's going to be the best thing. You could throw a little atrazine with it as well.
In soybeans, I like the 3 pre-emerge program that we've been using to fight resistant weeds. I especially like Metribuzin in the mix as a helper for smartweed. But then post-emerge, if you're using conventional herbicides, I like Pursuit or Raptor. Otherwise, Roundup and Liberty both do an excellent job.
Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, Pennsylvania Smartweed. But stay tuned, Iron Talk is coming up next.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
We farm mostly soybeans, probably a third of it is corn. We switched to the Liberty Link trait about 5 years ago. We've had real good success with it. It's helped us control our weeds. Our biggest weed challenge would be the pigweed, and we get our fields clean when we start, and then we usually try to come back 28 to 30 days after planting with our Liberty and a post-emerge. And the Liberty is just easier, and we don't have to be a chemist to mix our chemical. Very simple, and it works. It's all done real well, and we're just very happy with the Liberty Link system.
The Liberty Link system, a simply better solution, now backed by the Liberty Weed Control Guarantee, because Liberty is simply better weed control by Bayer.
I would recommend Morton for many reasons, but one is that they have a long history of standing behind their buildings.
Our sales experience with Morton was a nice experience. You know, they told us what it was going to cost, what it was going to be, you know, how it was going to run, and it worked out really well for us.
Morton has built me one heck of a nice building, and it should stand for a very, very long time. I was very happy with the workmanship.
Check us out online at mortonbuildings.com.
Sometimes getting the yield you want means a whole new game plan. Time to send in the A-Team. AgroLiquid isn't like other fertilizers. Their nutrient-balanced products stay in the soil in the right formulations and just the right amounts. And with its unique chelation technology, you wind up using less and seeing more in your yields. Make a smart start with AgroLiquid. Find a nutrient coach near you at agroliquid.com.
With new seed traits and chemistries entering the market, your crop protection equipment needs precision and adaptability. Hypro Innovative Spray Technologies has the products to give your applications greater accuracy, less drift, and more coverage. Hypro, right on technology, right on target.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
What type of hydraulic fluid do you use in your equipment? In today's Iron Talk, we'll discuss how upwards of 50% of the hydraulic oil being used in tractors today may be leading to poor performance and more breakdowns. I hope I caught your attention, because there's a big difference in hydraulic oils that you can buy for your tractors. Also, your attention to cleanliness can have an impact as well. Let's start at the cap and work our way through your system. Removing the dirt and contamination from the cap and cleaning the filter inside will keep your hydraulic oil clean. If the seal on the cap is not perfect, replace the seal. It's a cheap fix and super important. Then let's talk about that cheap yellow bucket of hydraulic oil sitting in your shop. Does it contain the right additives for your tractor specs? The reason why is that the gears, the wet brakes, and the transmissions that you must protect are not like those on your car. For example, the transmission fluid for your car provides insufficient gear wear protection for your tractor. Cheap tractor hydraulic fluid may not be made of good stock and certainly doesn't have the right additives, as you'll often hear brake chatter with squealing and squawking. I know it may cost $30 more for a bucket of good quality hydraulic fluid that meets or exceeds multiple OEM standards and meets the specs of your tractor's fluid requirements, but it's a very small insurance policy to pay. Getting the right fluid helps extend the life of your tractor and results in far fewer breakdowns and overall better performance. Avoid sticking valves and clutch plates. Get the right hydraulic fluid for your high-performance tractors and equipment. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, we want to invite you to tune into the Ag PhD radio show. You'll find us each weekday on SiriusXM Channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central, and we'll take your live phone calls each show.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Read of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Crop residues from previous crops are highly beneficial to our soils and the environment. As residues break down naturally in the soil, they release nutrients for future crops, but can also become organic matter in the soil, providing nutrient and water holding capacity and a home for soil microbes. Visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org to learn how farmers manage crop residues.